Hello, my name is Damon Young, editor and curator of That's How They Get You, an unruly anthology of Black American humor. I'm here today with Wyatt Cenac, who is one of the contributors of the book. We're going to talk a little bit about movies, about humor, about TV, and also about cocaine.
One of my favorite movies that I had on VHS and would watch all the time was Beverly Hills Cop.
Okay.
And one of the things that I learned later in life about Beverly Hills Cop, and it's something that allows me to appreciate it that much more now, is that Beverly Hills Cop was originally written for Sylvester Stallone, and then Stallone didn't want to do it because he'd just done Cobra. So then they gave it to Eddie Murphy, and
I didn't know any of this. Yeah.
Yeah. But it's kind of wild to rewatch Beverly Hills Cop through that lens, knowing that, oh, this was not written for Eddie Murphy, but what is amazing is Eddie Murphy turned it into his own thing. Mm-hmm. That said, there's a part of me that likes to believe that there's a version of this that Sylvester Stallone would have walked into the Polo Club in Beverly Hills and been like, "Hey there, it's me, Ramon. Will you tell Victor Maitland he has herpes simplex 12?" And pretending to be a prostitute. But that's all Eddie Murphy, just basically ripping up the script and going and sort of creating something. But it's just kind of I think there's something that I appreciate both about, him as a creative person taking something and interpreting it, but then also to watch it and to be able to see it in these ways that there are some people who just watch it and they're like, oh, it's just a funny action movie. But then there's, to me, this also subversive thing of Sylvester Stallone would have never been able to make that.
Hell no. I mean, did he invent the action comedy?
Have you ever seen Cotton Comes to Harlem?
Yeah.
Is that an action comedy? Would that qualify?
It might be, and there I go, cannibalizing, forgetting about blaxploitation, black movies.
Well, but some of those, they're funny in a way that they didn't intend to be. They play funnier now than they did in the moment. Like if you watch Willie Dynamite, it's a very serious movie. Yeah. But you're watching the character of Willie Dynamite in all of these just outrageous, brightly colored, different costumes throughout the movie that are ridiculous, and it's hard to take seriously. But it's also hard to take seriously knowing that the actor who plays Willie Dynamite, Roscoe Orman, he did Willie Dynamite, and then the next job he got was Gordon on Sesame Street. And
that's range.
It is range.
That's range, right.
But also one of the funnier things watching that movie is at the very end of Willie Dynamite, he's given up his life as a pimp, and he puts on just some jeans and a shirt, and then he gets on a bicycle, and he starts riding through the neighborhood. And I think before he gets on the bicycle, he throws a football with some neighborhood kids, and he becomes Gordon. It is, he just rode onto Sesame Street, and Big Bird has no idea what what his old life was. And every now and again, there might be a character that shows up looking for Willie, and Gordon's like, "Oh, I don't know any Willie," and then "Come here," and he's like, "Get the hell out of here!" Yeah, I've changed.
It's like Kareem on Airplane.
Yeah, exactly.
In preparation for this, I was thinking about some of my favorite comedies, some of my favorite, performances.
Sure.
Many of them are from the 80s, 90s. Like my all-time favorite comedy is I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker.
Yeah.
Right?
Great movie.
If that type of humor, particularly humor in movies, do you feel like it's something that, I guess, makes more of an impact on you when you're younger? Like it does something, it implants a thing in your brain's comedic mainframe in a way that a comedy might not be able to do now, watching it at whatever age that I am.
I do think the younger you are, I think those things live with you in the same way that I think Star Wars, if you grew up watching it, you have a connection to it. If you're of a certain age, I think it grabs you in this way, which I also think is why parents are often really excited to plop their kid down and indoctrinate them early into the Star Wars universe or whatever their favorite, whether it's Coming to America or I'm Gonna Get You Sucker or something, where they can say, ooh, watch this. Because, yeah, I think about movies in the last 20 years. I can think about a movie like Black Dynamite, which I remember when it came out thinking, oh, this is great and it's hilarious, but it didn't sit with me in the same way that I'm Gonna Get You Sucker or Hollywood Shuffle or Coming to America still sit with me to this day. Will those hit in 20, 30 years? Maybe not, just because things aren't as monocultural as they used to be.
And that might be it, the lack of a monoculture, where you're not having people experiencing the exact same thing. I mean, you'll have like the show The Pit, for instance, or House of the Dragon, or something like that, a big,
Right.
a big TV event sort of thing,
Like a Super Bowl, yeah.
or something like that. But you're not having, you're not having music hit the same way. You're not having movies, in general, outside of like the superhero movies, hit the same way.
Right.
Where, so many people are all watching the same thing and all talking about the same thing. Again, the lack of monoculture, and I think also it just becomes crowded.
Yeah.
You just have so many, you have all this stuff that's already stuck inside of you that it becomes harder and harder for more things to make their way inside of you and stick inside of you.
Yeah. With comedy or any creative endeavor, it feels like two things. Those things are always evolving with time, but it's the age of discovery that I think gives it the most meaning to you. And I think the younger you are, when you are a kid in your teens, in your early 20s, I think those things are hitting you as these kind of new moments. It's always chasing that same energy of, we watched something that seemed forbidden or something that wasn't, especially also if it's like something that wasn't for me, but I got it. Even a movie like Blazing Saddles, I feel like I was young when I first saw it. And I remember thinking, I get this movie, and it's saying a lot of different things, and I'm enjoying it, even though it was made in a time, I don't know that I was born yet, so it wasn't even made for me.
Yeah.
And yet everything they're talking about still resonates with me in this way that feels like it makes it feel fresh to me, because A, I'd never seen the movie before, but B, right, these things they're still resonant.
Yeah, well, one thing that happens also when you revisit some of these old movies is that, particularly that Coming to America, watching that again, and you find new things, nuances, or certain things that you may not have noticed or may not have, thought to really think twice about, the first several times you see it. Like, for instance, with Coming to America, Lisa is dating Daryl. Daryl's the asshole.
Right.
The
Eric LaSalle.
Yes. The Soul Glow,
The heir.
Scion. The heir of Soul Glow.
The Eric Trump of Soul Glow.
Yes, the Eric Trump of Soul Glow. And so the idea in the movie is that, because it's pretty obvious how much of a dick he is.
Yeah.
Like, from moment one. And Lisa's not an idiot, right? You could see that he's a dick. He's not like hiding it.
Yeah.
Right. And so the idea was like, she's with him because he comes from money, he's handsome, he had juicy hair, all of those things.
Yeah.
But if you rewatch that movie, Daryl is always wearing like 18 layers of clothing in every scene, right? There's a scene where they're at a St. John's basketball game, right? He's wearing like a poncho, a parka, a teepee, a caftan. My theory was that Lisa wasn't with him because he was rich. She was with him because she is anemic. And, it's like, this man will always keep me warm.
Right, yeah.
And I have my iron deficiency, and this guy always has like an extra layer that she could borrow.
I wonder if he's wearing all those layers because he needs to absorb all all the
Perhaps.
soul glow that
Yes.
like if he gives her the top layer, it is just drenched.
Yeah.
And
even watching I'm Gonna Get You Sucker again, one of the ideas in that movie was that Keenan Ivory Wayans' character was like kind of like, socially awkward, nerdy, didn't have really much experience with women or whatever. But you watch that movie, one, he's built like Captain America.
I know.
Right? And that's something that didn't really dawn on me. Like when I watched it as a kid, it's like, yo, this dude is brolic as fuck.
Yeah.
And he's super handsome. It's like, no,
Yeah.
you weren't having any trouble getting women.
I mean, that's why it's kind of bizarre that he only did one action comedy. He
Yeah.
did Low Down Dirty Shame. In today's Hollywood, if he were, there would be so many scripts that Michael B. Jordan didn't want, and they would say, oh, let's give them the Keenan I. Wayans.
There'd be no room for like Aaron Pierre or,
Yeah.
that's Mufasa. Yeah, there'd be no room for that.
No,
Keenan would be like, I got this, Mufasa. I got this.
Yeah.
I could do it. Thinking about movies and getting back to that, and just in terms of stuff made in like the last like 20 years, there have been a few that I would put on that have made it inside of me. Undercover Brother is one of them. Malcolm Lee directed that. Eddie Griffin, Dave Chappelle's in it. Denise Richards, Anjanae Ellis. I mean, it's I feel like it's I feel like it's a perfect movie, and it's not necessarily a movie that was going to win an Oscar for Best Picture or anything like that, right? But I felt like it did exactly what it intended to do. Everything is supposed to be funny, worked. All the satire remained consistent. The performances remained consistent, and it just was a movie that I feel like isn't on a lot of people's humor Mount Rushmores or humor pantheons, but needs to be there.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I wonder, again, thinking about just how much content there is today, and even when that movie came out, because I think about Friday might have been one of the last movies that I can think of that was like, oh, everybody I know is talking about this movie.
Yeah.
So many comedies that are geared towards a teenage or 20-something audience that speak to the moment that they're going through or just getting out of, like Undercover Brother, or just so many movies that I feel like come out now that just get lost in the abundance of content.
And I also think too that a lot of I'm thinking of shows like not really a comedy. I'm thinking of shows like Atlanta.
Sure. Yeah.
Which some of the funniest things I've ever seen
Yeah.
were in that show. But I don't know if you consider Atlanta to be a comedy. It had comedic elements, and but every episode wasn't funny.
Right.
There were
Yeah.
funny parts of every episode. I May Destroy You, comedic elements.
Yeah.
So you have these shows, even Insecure, shows that you could say that they're comedies, but they're about other things.
Right.
They're not just about they're not just in service of the joke.
Right.
Not just in service of making you laugh. They're in service of telling the story, and sometimes that story involves absurdity. Sometimes that story involves satire. Sometimes that story involves deep trauma, drama, whatever. It feels like most of the comedies that work today are those not quite a comedies.
Well, and I wonder how much of that also is something that is unique to the Black experience, just kind of going back to your book, That's How They Get You.
That's how they get you.
How much of Black humor is rooted in a sort of dynamic that has to hold space for, it can be silly, but then, there is satire, there is trauma, there are all these things, because these are things that generationally that we have held, they've been woven into our experiences, and that maxim of laughing to keep from crying is, is that element of the Black experience that I feel like a lot of people talk about, a lot of people feel they know, and that when you think about some of those comedies from the 70s or the 80s, you know, you think about something like, again, thinking about Blazing Saddles, like Richard Pryor was a co-writer on it, but it was Mel Brooks's movie. Beverly Hills Cop, Eddie Murphy is taking over a movie, but he's not the director of it. He's not even the full screenwriter of it. When I think about Harlem Nights, which he did write and direct, Harlem Nights is a funny movie, but it's also dealing with trauma. You look at Richard Pryor made, you know, this is JoJo Dancer Your Life is Calling. Like Richard Pryor he wrote it, he directed it, he starred in it, and it's a movie that is, you know, about a comedian, but it is very much a heavy film. And so I wonder now, as you see more black creatives getting to use their voices in a way that is less, it is put through less of those filters, and it isn't being ground up in those ways. If seeing something like Atlanta, where it can hold space for these things, in my mind, I still see it as a comedy, but it's different than Friends or Dave or something like that, because there is an element of blackness in the black experience that you can't pretend these things don't exist for too long.
There are higher stakes.
There are.
Yeah, there are stakes.
There are.
There are stakes,
And it's not like you can't live in the bubble of cops don't assault and, and beat black people and disabuse them of their own rights and things like that. You can't move through a world where racism doesn't exist in your comedy for too long. It's impossible. Even if you're trying not to be political, the act of being apolitical is a political act unto itself. And there's a luxury that white comedians have that, you know, they can say, oh, I don't want to be political, and they can get away with that longer than I feel like a lot of black comedians can, because, if you're making comedy in a world where police brutality is happening and you don't have anything to say, then there's an audience, there's a part of your audience that they're paying attention to it. You're probably going to lose that part of the audience if in the summer of 2020, all of a sudden it's like, hey, we're going to make a new Bad Boys movie. That's not reading the room. And so then you wait a few years and you do it in 2024.
And to your point, I mean, you even brought up Friday. I mean, Friday could be just, if you remove the comedy from that movie, you remove the humor from that movie, it's a movie about a group of guys, two guys that have a drug debt, and a murderous drug dealer who has threatened to kill them and will kill them if they don't come back with the debt. Right? Life, which is still a traumatic movie. These guys are in prison for life for a crime they did not commit. Has some of the funniest scenes, I feel like, in any movie in the last 50 years, but it is so difficult to watch because you're like, yo, these guys, they're really going to be in there for life. They're not getting out. They're like, and it ends with them being like 120 years old and finally getting out, right? And it's just like, this isn't like cathartic. This is sad. This is a sad movie. This isn't a comedy.
Well, and I think I guess maybe that's part of the thing, is when you think about black humor and black comedy in relation to sort of the broader, more general definition of comedy, is black comedy built for escape? Or is it built to do something else? And because I feel like you can say, oh, the general broad sense of comedy, it's escape. That doesn't mean that it isn't still making pointed comments and still doing things. It's not really doing it with the intention of making you think. It's just shut your brain off. Do you feel that with black humor and black comedy, that definition of escapism it's harder to apply?
I think so because, you know, and you mentioned how a white comedian could be apolitical with his humor, but, you know, as you also said, being apolitical is a political act.
Yeah.
Having the privilege to be apolitical, and it's not even choosing to be apolitical, you're making a choice.
Yes.
You're not apolitical. You are making a choice to remove yourself, which is an indictment of your own privilege, your own whiteness, your own perspective, or lack of perspective, or whatever. And so, you know, I think of a movie like Girls Trip. That's a movie that I think is a black movie, black people in it, that is somewhat escapist. You know, it's about friendship, so it's not necessarily about like these larger themes of trauma or of death or economic anxiety or whatever. But
Well, there's a little economic anxiety.
a little, but they're at Essence Fest.
Sure.
You know.
But I do think that, but just that little bit of it, I do feel like they still have to acknowledge that if this were a movie about 4 white girlfriends, they could go take the trip without, like, it's a choice they make if they want to say, well, one character may not be able to afford it.
Yeah.
This feels very much like, you know, the critique of the Cosby Show that people would always make. This is an unrelatable family to a large swath of black Americans. And they never talk about finances. You never see the cousin of the Huxtables who comes over, who, you know, is in a single parent household. You never see that. And I feel like, at least in Girls Trip, there was this moment to at least acknowledge.
That's true.
Right. We're not all like, we're like, this isn't the Wakanda version where we're all financially stable. We at least have to, we see you, we're nodding, and then, all right, now we can go and piss in the street.
I'm reminded an interview. I either read it or saw it. Michaela Cole, you know, creator of I May Destroy You, had, I forgot which publication it was in, and I'm paraphrasing what she said. Okay, so the interviewer asked her, you know, with that show, which dealt with consent and assault and all these very, very serious subject matter, very sober subject matter, it was also extremely funny. And the person asked her, like, what makes you insert humor in something so serious, something so sober? And her response was, I don't insert humor, I just don't remove it. I was like, oh, that's black humor.
Yeah.
That's black humor in a nutshell.
Yeah.
You know, we don't have to insert the humor. It's just a part of our existence, and it exists at the same time as we're, you know, experiencing this trauma and thinking about, you know, how we're going to pay for this thing, and thinking about our families, and thinking about, you know, police brutality, and all these things that are part of just the tapestry of our consciousness, right? But humor is also there.
Yeah.
Humor is never not there.
Yeah.
But that's how they get you.
That is how they get
That's
you.
how they get you.
Yeah. I feel like we're like on some like PBS book chat show.
The furriness that's coming from this direction, and also my direction too, kind of leads to that.
Thank you for watching. Again, you can get Damon's book at all your finest retailers. And we'll be back with another installment. That's how they get you. And then some jazz starts playing. And, the lights kind of like slowly fade down while we're just chatting. They don't know what we're chatting about.